All right, welcome to this lesson. So, how does the brain work? We've already talked a bit about this theory of cognitive neuroscience called predictive processing. To summarize, this says that the brain builds an internal model of the external world and then tries to minimize the surprise using these different layers of processing. We're going to talk more in detail about how the brain actually does this today and also apply it to ancient model of meditation and how the mind works. So on a micro level, when the brain receives information that it doesn't expect, in other words, it doesn't match its internal model, then it creates what's called a prediction error. An example would be if you look and out of the corner of your eye, you see this little black dot on the white rug. Now, that's not expected to be there. Your brain expected a clean white rug, but it saw a black dot and that created a prediction error, which grabs your attention because it demands an explanation. And so normally your eyes wouldn't have even gone there, but this prediction error called for like further cognitive resources to explain or update the model about what that information is and whether it should do something about it. Now, let's say the black dot matches your brain's description of a spider. It's got 8 legs and it looks like it could even bite you. So now this is another prediction error, probably higher up the layers of your brain, because now you're thinking and planning about what to do about the spider. So it went from a just kind of obscure black dot, could have been no big deal, your eyes dart over there, just a speck, no worry, and then you don't even think about it. But if it becomes more worrisome, then it can create what I call the major prediction errors, which are things like worry and agitation and regrets and all the things that tend to cause most of our mental suffering throughout the day. As this diagram is showing, a prediction error is when the external world, how we think it should appear, doesn't match our internal model of how the world actually works. And just to put it in kind of other simpler terms, it's when things happen that we don't expect to happen. And that's where the mind needs to suddenly formulate a new idea of how the world works. And when this happens on a larger level, like let's say we suddenly went bankrupt or we got in an accident, now there's a really big update that's needed in our internal model. Our entire schedules and plans might be ruined. Our whole life plan might need an update. And this causes this initial period of great distress as we need to figure out and repredict all these things that we thought would go a certain way. And this also happens on a more micro level, just when we notice something like a pesky fly that we think shouldn't be there, and it's buzzing around us and causing us all sorts of annoyance. Now, the Indian wisdom traditions had a word for this called dukkha. This doesn't translate exactly into English. The best definitions that I've heard are bummers and that one wheel of the shopping cart that's kind of angling off to the side and won't let you drive it straight. But it's also been translated as dis-ease or pain or suffering, or I also like agitation. So this is essentially everything from the smallest little crinkle in your pants that makes you want to change positions all the way up to a full-on torture. It's the also translated as dissatisfaction that's inherent in just being alive in the human condition. There's a way in which prediction errors, you could say, are dukkha in terms of neuroscience and what's happening in the brain. But there's a key distinction to make here. I mean, some prediction errors are just a normal part of life, like what causes us to pay attention to something, or what causes us to go get food when we're hungry. And that's not what we're trying to eliminate with the meditation practice. I would estimate that 95% to 99% of our mental suffering comes from our reactivity and from the major prediction errors that get layered on top of these smaller things. So, in other words, in terms of the spider analogy, when you see the spider itself is probably not causing you any harm. Very few people actually die of spider bites, but because of our evolution and the ancestors that didn't make it from spider bites, we might get a little too worked up about the spider and then really start worrying about it. And all of that dukkha is probably unnecessary. Sure, we might have to do something about it, but worrying and distress and all these other things we layer on top, the major prediction errors, are not an essential part of life. And that is what we're trying to let go of with the practice. In the Buddhist tradition, our reaction to things that we don't like is called the second dart, because it's like we've been struck by the first dart, which is pain. Let's say we stub our toe. And then the second dart is if we throw a tantrum about it and we start getting really angry at the furniture we stubbed our toe at. And all of that, the second dart is the part that in this case is avoidable. And there's an interesting study on meditators that, in a kind of cruel way, I mean, they signed up for this study, but they were signing up to get burned by a device that wouldn't actually create physical tissue damage, but it would deliver a very hot sensation. And those with more experience in meditation, as this graph shows, you can see the red line here, for example, as an expert meditator, had less reaction in their brain to when they were told that the very hot sensation was coming. And then they actually had a greater reaction when the pain came itself. It's almost like they were feeling it more for just a split second. And then again, you could see the red line drop off drastically. So there was less anticipation and worry that it was coming. And there was also less thought about, oh, that was so painful, and kind of replaying it in their mind. So the idea is that through training and meditation, we can start to spend less time and less agitation. There will be less dukkha in our minds about future events that haven't come yet and past things that have recently happened to us. And in that way, it's like we're viewing things as they are without layering on top of this second dart of reactivity that causes the, 95 to 99% of our mental agitation. So just as a exercise, you can ask yourself to look at some of the things that are causing the most dukkha in your life. For example, the urge to prove something to friends or family or to the world or to yourself can cause a lot of dukkha. Trying to keep the body perfectly healthy and pain-free, that can cause a lot of dukkha. Always thinking about health concerns. Again, some of it's reasonable, but a lot of those worries are kind of over-planning. There's also the need to be always right about things. Our opinions cause a lot of dukkha and arguments. And then also, I've noticed that judging other people for the way that they like to do things causes a lot of dukkha. We're always kind of looking around and, oh, look at that person doing that thing. I don't like that. They should be doing it this way. And sometimes we don't even realize how much turmoil this creates in our minds. So practically applying the 4 R's, we can recognize, that's the first R, recognize when the mind kind of locks on to some part of our experience. And whether it's an itch or an insult from somebody, if it's causing us dukkha, then we can release, which is the second R. and we release and we relax the tension in our body like opening a fist. And then we can relish when the dukkha's gone, and especially if we bring up a positive state of mind like metta or compassion, delight, gratitude, equanimity. We relish in these positive, more peaceful states of mind. And then the fourth R is to remain, to keep feeding the positive state until the next major prediction error or the next major dukkha comes along. In this way, we're training the mind to see that whenever it's resisting something, whenever it's reacting and saying, I don't like the way things are, that's the cause of our dukkha. And we can let that go. We have the power to retrain that. So your daily challenge is to notice what creates the most tension in your mind and then see if you can let that go. See if it's something you can let go of even just a little bit, loosen that belief or that thought or that thing that's triggering you. And of course, for some people, this might be something more challenging, like a physical harm, or maybe you're grieving a loved one. And so there's kind of heavier weights to lift here. But part of this mental fitness training is the recognition that we do have the power to train our minds and train our reactions to things so that events start to lose some of their control over us. And I wish you great success with your training. I'll see you tomorrow.